off my jacket?
I think at this stage, Ken, yes.
That's the only thing I will take off.
Tracksuit.
I was going to bring my tracksuit here.
Blow your whistle, Ken.
We don't want too much barracking as last year. I know I'm not a judge. I remember last year with, I am pointing a finger at John, who barracked and nearly got sent out. But anyway,
punished him for contempt, shouldn't I?
But I would advocate that you do barrack if you want to as I go along, because I'm going to be a little bit controversial. Do you recognise this tie?
No.
No? No one? Thank you. Millfield. Does anyone recognise these? These socks, I meant. They're Millfield. I'm not going to show you what pants I've got on, but they are Oratory pants. I haven't changed them for 50 years.
Sure,
anyway, that's the first part. I just wanted to mention something about Millfield to begin with, because, by the way, I've got a bit of dementia, so I may be looking down at my notes because I do forget things these days. Do any of you have the same problem?
No.
No. Thank God for that. I am going to have the odd glass of port as it goes along.
Just remember where your notes are.
But what I do remember is getting, and I don't want to talk about myself too much,
Hooray.
but someone was going to have a raffle about how long I was going to talk. Was that Pip Dukes who said he might go on for about an hour? No, I'm going to try and be like Chris Robshaw, a man with very few words, but more action. So I will try to do what he tries to do, but of course he was unsuccessful in not beating the All Blacks. But the first thing I wanted to say was it was a real privilege for me to get a sports scholarship to Millfield, and I played in a first 15. This is in 1955. We won 10 games, drew one, and we lost one. And I hated it. And do you know the side that beat us? 1955. You won't guess it at all.
Marlborough.
Nope.
Downside.
Who?
Downside.
Grammar School.
No, Clanethley Grammar School. That's a good one. No. They could have been. Very good guess. Do you know who it was?
Tell us.
And to this day, I learnt a great deal about coaching and fitness and all the rest of it. It was the Royal Naval College
Handball.
Dartmouth. And they beat us. I think it was 5-3. I've got it somewhere in here. I've got a book, by the way, you can have a look later. It's got Oratory, Millfield Rugby 1963. I know we're talking about cricket as well, but this is about Millfield. But I learnt a great deal that day. We had a really fantastic side at Millfield, really a tip top. But I realised how good these cadets were. They'd come from all these public schools, and they had an Irishman, an Irish international. I can't remember because my dementia is creeping up on me. It was that was 60 years ago or more. But I realised just how important fitness was. And I realised that the Navy at that time, I mean, they know Portsmouth, they're going to close it soon, aren't they? With all the cuts and so on. But in those days, the Navy was important, and these people had to be at the real top level. And so did the Royal Marines, which I joined later. But why I bring this up is that I think what I learned was that you can have all the skills, but unless you've got that real fitness. And they ran for 80 minutes, non-stop. And as I say, we lost 5-3, or whatever it was. And it was a good lesson for me. But that seven-a-side side that I played in, after that, we won the Oxford, we won the Clifton, and we, again, it was something to do with fitness. We had the skills, but we lost to the side, can you remember the Rosslyn Park Public School Sevens? Yes. Well, we got into the semi-final, and the team that beat us in the semi-final went on to win the final, and it grated me at the time. Anyway, that's enough about Millfield. I'm going to just take this time and throw it away.
And your socks.
But I am going to, no, not the socks, not the pants. I came to the Oratory School in 1961 with experience of being, I suppose, having watched those cadets in the Navy. I didn't imagine myself in bell bottoms, so I joined the Royal Marines instead. But I'm really pleased I did, because it was a tremendous experience. And I know this last week the Royal Marines have come into disrepute from this bloke, killing people who killed his own comrades. And there is a big question mark about the training that they give you. But I came, obviously, to the Oratory with that background of, you know, being trained to kill people and all that sort of stuff, and then going to Loughborough. But what I wanted to say... But what I wanted to say to you was that I've got to compliment you, because one of the things I think I tried to ingrain in, and it wasn't just to do with me, and I'm so pleased that Dougie Butler's here and Mike's not here, but we were into the business, I remember right at the very beginning saying, winning matters. Now, winning doesn't really matter, but it does.
It does.
And I suppose what I tried to do, and Doug, and we used to have all these sort of funny meetings, didn't we? How we were going to win, and the tactics and all the rest of it. And I loved it. But I think it was good experience, you know, taking you out I don't know what it was. I exaggerate now. I think it was 5:30 or 6 o'clock. I used to get them up and go training, and then we'd have logs and all the rest of it, you know. And it did benefit because we were actually in some ways a lot fitter than the other sides that we played. But what I was really going to go on to, and Doug has asked me to talk about the game, which took place on October the 26th, 1963. But I think it was due to my relationship with Millfield School that I was determined to secure a rugger fixture against them, because I knew they were the best. And I wanted to see what the Oratory really were, you know, how they were going to be tested. And I wrote to R.J. O'Myers, and probably Tony here as an archivist, he would probably know quite a bit about, you know, headmasters of schools. He built this school up from nothing. It was one of the richest schools in the country, and he attracted international pupils, which in those days, you know, wasn't the big thing. It is now. But in those days, he was ahead of his time. But he agreed. He loved a challenge. He'd got a first-class honours degree at Cambridge and all that sort of stuff. He was a triple blue, and he was a marvellous headmaster, and he couldn't resist sort of when he responded to my letter saying, yes, we'll have a game against you and we'll beat you. Anyway, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read. I've been scanning through. God, I ought to work for MI5. Charlie Coke is the first person. Charles, are you still here?
Yeah.
Good. Anyway, I've got something that I took from your email. I remember the first Millfield game, if only because I was lucky enough to play in it. I'm sure we lost 11-16. We were down 8-16 with maybe 10 minutes to go, and it was Colin Mackenzie. Is Colin here? No. On the right wing, who ran in a try from quite a long way out and set up, listen to this, Charles must have been a literary student, a frenetic finale. What does that mean, frenetic, Charles? I loved it because he was a bit frenetic. What does it mean, Charles?
I don't know.
It means banging your head against the goalpost. That's
Well, he was frenetic himself, and I loved that when I was looking at. I've got something here from Roger Booz. Well, he's in Dallas, isn't it? Or
Texas, yes.
Texas somewhere. It was a dignified loss, if such a thing exists. I believe we scored first in that game, very much to our surprise. I remember being extremely impressed, not with Millfield. Who was he impressed with? Was that tall bloke, where is he? Patrick. He thought you were like God, he said, and his strength and the line-outs and rucks. So that's a real compliment. This comes from Roger Booz. He was the captain on that day.
Well done, Patrick.
Here's a toast. The next person, Patrick, I'm not going to go through hundreds, Doug, it's all right. Patrick Nesbitt. I do remember the 1963 match against Millfield well, and I do remember losing, but not feeling at all bad about our performance. What sticks in my mind, though, is a 10-foot black winger on their side, and I can use the word black, I'm not, you know, it's not racist. There's plenty of really good, brilliant black players now playing, but what a match! And I love this. And what it was to be young. The next one. Well, I thought he wasn't in the senior Colts. It just shows how your dementia creeps up on you. This is Tony Grasser-Stillwell.
Who? Never heard of him.
I don't know whether you've heard of him. He was in the senior Colts. I hadn't realised that on the 1963 game. But it says here, I remember that first encounter of the OS against Millfield as though it was yesterday. from the touchline as a spectator, the build up to the game was awesome. The way the school rallied around the first 15 was incredible. We were still senior Colts, and I remember the expressions of the Millfield side, this is what I love, and came off the top field after they had narrowly beaten in an incredible OS first 15. They did not know quite what had hit them, and it was this first 15 that laid down the incredible standard of future things to come. They're still wondering whether it was Monday morning or manoeuvres. I don't know where he got that from. I remember Keith Hornby, oh God, not him, tackling unbelievable. The new attitude to the game that Ken brought to the OS, thanks. But later, Mike Wood and Dougie Butler set the pace for decades to the present day. Well, I don't agree with that, because later I'm giving you a little test, by the way, so it didn't go on for decades at all. Pip Jukes, I just wanted to mention him because with Doug he helps to organise this, and he was a senior Colt. Didn't realise, I thought he was playing in the side. As a senior Colt, I stood on the touchline in awe of Keith Hornby, the pocket rocket, who travelled, you aren't Doctor Who as well, are you? Who travelled horizontally at great speed, headfirst into the guts of the opposing players, regardless of whether they were even holding the ball at a particular time. Now, it's something I never coached. I think I can remember saying to Alistair MacDonald, who was very serious, wasn't he? He was. I said, that Blesley Byrne, even if he lets the ball go, just hit him. You saw it yesterday, and in the All Blacks, it's touch and go sometimes when you hit someone, and I shouldn't have really been advocating that as a coach. I mean, now I'd get banned by the rugby union or whatever it is, but it was true. Anyway, yeah, so that was a little bit about Keith. Just the last thing.
Perfectly fair. It was perfectly fair. I hit him as he caught the bloody ball.
All right, we'll
Sometime soon
you.
thereafter.
I'm coming on to Keith in just two more. James de Albuquerque, where are you, James? Yes, he put, because he was a cricketer as well as he played some rugby, but I can understand all the confusion about the results of the game against me. I remember watching it, and it was a bruising game. And I love that word, bruising. Anyway, Keith Hornby, I've had to cut this a little bit, and I probably would get had up, you know, for not producing all the facts, but he did speak last year very eloquently about these things. But Keith says, listen to this though, I don't know whether I've manipulated the words or not, I find it very difficult to think that we lost. I was sure we had won. Amazing how I remember it all as though it was yesterday. I still find it difficult to accept we did not win in 1960. My case rests there. What did Ken Carter say? Well, I was really proud of the way that team, not a bunch of individuals, and also what really got me was the school, and Grasser touched on it, how the school got behind this, whether they liked rugby or not. And I love that, because when I went to New Zealand, the only time I've ever been to New Zealand, I was talking to a lot of Maoris and women, and men and women, and I said, what about this game of rugby? And they said, we love, and they were almost doing the haka, women as well. And it was something that the All Blacks, when you think of 3 million people and 9 million sheep in New Zealand, but they all get behind. It's something to do with their cultural identity, and it's very powerful. And that day, the school, you know, all right, we lost, but the school got behind it, and obviously it's reflected in those comments. But what I wanted to go on and say was, everyone played their part and went down fighting until the whistle blew for full time. Millfield, I know this, went back to Somerset that night, bruised and shaken. I've been told, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Their team was allowed some cider on the way home, but not champagne. They weren't, the coaches weren't all that happy with their performance, even though they'd won. They knew they'd been up against a really formidable side, and that was important as far as I was concerned. But what is even better, and I only wish Tony, who's a marvellous archivist, you know, and keeps all these records, and I'm quite good, but not as good as I ought to be. I had a lovely letter from the boss, we call him the boss, the R.J. O'Meara, saying, congratulating the Oratory First 15 on their splendid performance, and also praising my coaching, he was always an outstanding PR man, and my sign for him, because I work with deaf people, is that, buttering you up. He was a master at buttering you up and making you sound a lot better than you really were. But that is sometimes quite important when you are a teacher and you're a coach. You know you've got to sometimes praise as well as criticise. Anyway, this is where the exam comes in for all of you. I'm very, very grateful, and I know Dora's not here. I'm very grateful to Dick Shilton. You won't have heard of him. I don't know whether Tony has, but he was a teacher at Millfield, and he is the Millfield's archivist at the moment, and also Dora Nash, who is our archivist and alumni, and she does a brilliant job. Yeah. But they've been so helpful in pulling together some facts and figures about subsequent matches. Do you know the technique I used? When I went to Dick Shilton, I said, I'm giving this talk to a whole bunch of, not funny oratorians, but I said, amongst them, there's a judge, there's lawyers, there's solicitors, there's accountants, and I want to get my facts right. So can you please make sure you come back with the right data? Anyway, this is the little test. 1963, we know who won, Millfield, and I've thrown the tie on the floor here. 1964, what do you think the score was against Millfield in 1964?
29.
6-21.
Sorry?
29-6.
Pretty good, well done. Near?
6-21.
No.
No, that was Millfield won.
We won.
No, Millfield, this is 1964. Millfield won 27 points to 8. Sorry, 9. Right, 1965. On the 23rd of October, what was the score?
13-3.
Who said that? Well done, Ray. Brilliant. You are a solicitor, aren't you? A lawyer. I knew. Thank God I did my homework. It was 13-3. Millfield beat us, but we reduced the... Now, this is where Doug Butler, I think I'd left by then, went to St Benedict's Ealing, and I'll come on to a little bit of that. But in 1966, what do you think was the score?
6-3.
8-5.
9-3.
No? What was that?
9-5.
9-5. Well done. And the Oratory beat. You heard him say that,
Yes,
did you?
I did.
Over to you, Doug. Right, I haven't finished yet, because this is important for my talk. 1967, who do you think won? Millfield. What score?
40-0.
No, 11-6. So the following year, it was 11-6. Were you the coach with you? No, someone had done. Right.
It's a guy called Ken Carter.
No, I'm not sure about that. Could be.
Who was
I
your
came
coach,
back
Jamie?
for another year. Anyway.
Who was your coach your year?
Chippy Wood.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. 1968.
Ken, how about the winning two-coach team that beat Millfield was Dougie Butler and Mike Wood.
Right, thank you.
Now we're on 66.
Right, 1960, oh God, I'm getting mixed up here. 1968, I'll quickly tell you this, Millfield won 14 points to 3. So it was still quite close. Now, this is what's significant. 1968, what do you think? Millfield won 46 points to 9. And this is what really grates me. In 1970, on the 17th of October, Millfield beat the Oratory how many? This isn't meant to depress you, but what do you think the score was?
50 now.
Cricket
No.
score.
63 points to 6. And it's interesting, what do you think the score was in 1971? There was no fixture. It was dropped.
because we weren't worth it.
No, well, at that time.
The
But
school had gone down to Swanee.
yeah. So that was a decade, 1961 to 1970. It was pretty formidable against the best school side probably in the country, so we've done very well. Anyway, just before I close, because I know there is not a raffle going
Your
around,
battery's
how long
running
I will
down.
take. I don't know how much time I've taken so far, but I want to close my address by mentioning some important and highly inspirational people. You're all inspirational, and I'll say this in a minute, but one of whom is not with us today, and never will be because he wants to die on bloody French soil, and that's Woody, our friend.
Yes.
I've got here, he put here, this is a quote from Mike. He says, I looked up some of his mail that he sent. He said, Ken got us the fixture with Millfield and then literally left Dougie and I to get on with it. So we were pretty pleased to squeeze past them. So this must have been 1966. With our somewhat unattractive but effective game plan. And I know these two, I mean, they used to spend bloody hours, you know, sort of, it was like a chess game. But Doug was a formidable competitor, and I'm really so thrilled that he's here today, and you know, I can at least acknowledge his.
He was called Gary Owen.
Gary Owen, yeah. Gary Owen. Not much more. Mike was an outstanding winning coach, and now coaches a very famous animal side in Bergerac. They aren't human beings. I think they're goats, but he gets such pleasure out of, you know, I've said this before, stroking them, and you know, he wouldn't.
But don't go on.
Did he stroke any of you?
Not a lot.
I don't think he was a paedophile, but you know.
They don't talk back.
They don't talk back. No, that's right. And Doug was a highly stimulating member of staff with his own scheming ways of winning, whether in the classroom. And I can remember one of his lectures, I felt not so good myself. He said about, you know, that your cells die after about the age of 21, and really it's downward hill. Doug seems to have got some tablets or something that goes up that other way. I think he's got more cells. But as a biologist, he obviously was very effective. And I can remember Mike and Doug always saying, no boy is ever going to fail biology and French. And I was there thinking, oh God, I'm supposed to be taking rugby, you know, and we're losing against this side and that side. But I think you had a pretty successful run, both in the classroom and on the field. But I was privileged, I think, because I've moved on and became a teacher of the deaf and so on, and I recognise really outstanding teachers. When I go into schools, I know how effective some teachers can be, and I was privileged, I think, and also with Tony. Quiet, but effective. And I know I'm in between these two, and I feel like a hooker. But Tony said, well, I was a hooker.
Happy hooker.
Right. One last thing. I want to pay tribute to this other Doug, and you know who that is. It's this bloke here, Doug Badger. And do you know what I put in my notes here? I showed it to Helen, my wife, and we met him in Stratford-upon-Avon the other day, and Helen's first thing, he's quite a gentleman, isn't he? You know, he's a man of integrity.
He's not quite a gentleman, he is a gentleman.
Oh, he is a gentleman, sorry, thank you. But I just want to put, this is what I put about him. I said, he's thoughtful. Yes, do you agree? I think you are. Caring. I remember him at Bullmarsh. He was head of the social care, a very caring person. This isn't meant to be buttering up too much, Doug. Able, yes, intellectually, really able. Humble. A humble person. You don't get so many people these days because we're all trying to sell ourselves and so on. Doug doesn't have to. He just gets on with what he has to do. What was the other thing I put about you? And a person of real substance and integrity. And I do feel, when I was looking across around at all of you, we've all got our foibles and strengths and weaknesses, but it's nice that, you know, I can address you and sort of know that 50 years on, most of you, you know, have tried to keep within the law. Is that right, Keith?
It's been hard.
Anyway, I just wanted to give Doug a clap. And my last sentence here, I also want to praise all of you, because you won't believe it, I was getting a little bit nervous this morning. I get this when I used to play rugby, is the adrenaline starts to come into you and you think, oh, I've got to win this game, you know, and someone reminded me, who was it who reminded me, the last time they saw me, I was running out onto the field in Twickenham or something, and I can remember being sick, you know, in the toilet. You hear about this, and it was adrenaline. You really wanted to do so well, and you thought, God, if I drop the ball, you know, and 60,000 people are watching you.
You
know,
did,
and
Ken.
it's terrible these days.
I was there.
Oh, you were? Did I drop the ball? No, I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to toast also absent friends, because there are lots of people who can't always get here. And the other thing that I've put here, and to thank you for all being so enthusiastic and passionate about rugby, cricket, and life itself, because I think it's something to do with life itself. If you can embrace it and really enjoy it. I mean, put up your hands, those people who really have enjoyed their life so far. Oh, there are only one or two who haven't. But do you know how important that is? Do you know how lucky we are? Every time I switch on the television, I think, if I was in the Philippines now, if I was in Syria now, if I were, you know, and you sometimes think of where you are and how privileged we are to be alive and to be passionate and enthusiastic and to come into a group like this. Anyway, my grandfather was a Methodist preacher, so I mustn't go on too much preaching. Anyway, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.